Well, today, ladies and gentlemen, in this video, we're going to be talking about who is, in fact, the best metal guitar brand. Let's get into it. So what is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. My name is Ray. I'm a guitar player here on YouTube. I am so excited to knock out this video because this is a very passionate debate and, dare I say, heated debate at times. And we as guitar players and metal guitar players are very loyal to certain brands and brand identity. And I wanted to kind of create a bit of a talking piece and a debate in this video about who is in fact the best metal guitar brand. Reason why I feel so compelled to make this video is last night, just out of curiosity, I put up a poll in my community tab and I asked the question, who is the best metal guitar brand? I gave 5 examples and then I ultimately left it up for debate in the comment section if there was a different brand out there that people thought was the best metal guitar brand. And man, oh man, did it get a lot of engagement, over 3,000 votes and a lot of comments, over 100 comments and over 100 likes. So thank you guys so much for participating. So I figured I'd translate that engagement in that poll into this video and talk about some of the things that I look for and some of the trends that I see with different brands that ultimately make them a good metal guitar brand. But at the end of the day, it's all subjectivity and it's all in good fun, right? So if you feel compelled to play along at home, leave your thoughts down below in the comment section about who you think is the best brand. And if you disagree with me or agree with me throughout the duration of this video, leave your thoughts down below. And last but not least, if you're brand new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. With that all being said, let's start talking about my own personal talking points about what I look for. So let's start talking. I've made some notes. The first note that I want to bring up is the overall branding itself of the brand. Everything from the shape of the guitars, the color of the guitars, the type of pickups, the type of headstock they choose to put on there, the types of woods they try to use, the artists they try to get on board, etc., etc. All that encompassing makes a brand metal, right? It's just branding in general. It's marketing in, the consumer market, whether it's guitars, clothes, cars, whatever, right? So in that community post, I thought of 5 brands off the top of my head that came to mind when I thought of like what makes a metal brand. Jackson, Schecter, Solar Guitars, ESP, and Ibanez are 5 that just came up to, came to the forefront of my brain when making that post. But there's certainly more. But those brands are just some of the examples of like, these are undoubtedly more or less metal brands. So that's the one thing that I just think of. And brands that like do the marketing very well and the branding very well are in fact Jackson, Dean Guitars, Solar Guitars. Those are the ones that, BC Rich is another good one where like very, very angular guitars, very weaponry-esque looking guitars, you know what I mean? Like a lot of blacks, a lot of reds, etc., man. So those are some of the brands that do the branding very well, but branding isn't everything. Another thing you got to look at is originality, man. Everybody's kind of copying each other. I mean, it's called how it is. I mean, Gibson and Fender were the first brands, and everything more or less can be traced back to those brands, generally speaking, and that's fine, dude. But there is a lot of originality and a lot of new ideas along the way. And especially with metal guitar brands, there's a lot of guitars that are pioneers, right? And so when I think of like pioneers and like just weaponry and like, I don't know, just original metal guitars, I think of Jackson. That's just where my brain goes. I'm thinking of like the Randy Rhoads, V, kind of the offset V with a pointy headstock, pointy horns. I mean, that's very original, man. And then like shortly thereafter, just following that up with like, I don't know, like a BC Rich bitch or like a Warlock, you know what I mean? Like undoubtedly metal branded guitars. The original shapes of those designs that those companies made really just stick out for me. So in terms of originality, a metal guitar brand has to have some sort of like, yeah, we did that first to their name and to their brand, Now, kind of switching gears and changing lanes, starting to talk about what the consumer looks for, what the consumer wants. Got to look at the price, man. In 2022, prices are just wild. You know what I mean? For better or for worse, mostly for worse. But some companies are still managing to have quote-unquote affordable guitars for not a lot of money. Again, generally speaking, not a lot of money. What's that even mean anymore, right? I don't know. But in terms of price, in terms of like bang for the buck, there's one company that really sticks out for me so far in 2022, and that is ESP, in particular with their LT line. Now, at the time of this filming, they've only released their phase 1 of their 2022 catalog, but oh my god, is it the best so far, objectively. I mean, I don't really see how anybody could argue that. You know what I mean? Like, that's just a personal opinion, and I did just say objectively, but I mean, come on, man. Like, stainless steel frets and just like insane specs to include, brand name pickups, maple tops, ebony boards, all the above, man. Like, they killed it for phase 1, and I can only imagine phase 2 and maybe a phase 3, I don't know, will do well as well. So you got to look at the prices, man. And one company that really, just from the consumer side of things and from my own personal experience in my own comment section of my YouTube videos, Jackson Guitars has been getting a lot of heat for their prices. That's just the opinions that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of other content creators talk about it as well. I mean, they're talking about like just how insanely priced Jackson guitars are. You know, that's just one example, but you know, the price really dictates the enthusiasm or lack thereof with a company, especially in the modern day in 2022. This talking point is something I really was looking forward to talking about, and that is personal nostalgia. This has to deal with personal branding as an artist, as a player, whatever you want to call yourself and or myself. Now, I've said it several times on this channel, but I'll say it again. I grew up with classic rock, you know what I mean? Like, that was my thing. The Fender Stratocaster was the first guitar that I became obsessed with, but then it quickly changed to the Gibson Les Paul, and I really don't play anything other than those two shapes here, you know, like 18 years later, ever since I started playing, right? So that like kind of childhood memory, being 10, 11 years old, first learning to play, really just holds true to me, and it's something that I latch onto and will forever cherish those moments. So the nostalgia of Gibson and Fender really dictates how I am as a consumer. That's just how I am, and you know, I've tried to get into other brands, and I do love other brands, but I'm just saying, like, I will never lose that nostalgic feeling of Gibson and Fender. That'll always be with me, and I can't help, that's kind of, you know, I have a soft spot for those brands. I am who I am, you know what I mean? And I'm unapologetically, you know, who I am, right? So anyway, getting back to you guys and just everybody else when determining who makes the best metal guitars, you know, it's kind of like you grew up liking what you like, and it's kind of hard to dictate, you know, anything other than what you like as a kid, right? You kind of always go back to where you started, and that's just not only my personal experience, but I've heard that a lot from a lot of players, right? So if you grew up loving Jackson or grew up loving Ibanez or Schecter or whatever, man, even more recently, if you just started playing Solar guitars and Solar guitars was your first guitar, for example, you know, you'll probably have a soft spot for those brands that you started out with. So people become very passionate and attached to brands because of that's what they grew up loving. Again, going back to Jackson, I've seen a lot of people say, like, Jackson's what I grew up with, so Jackson is the best. I bought a Jackson in the 80s, and it was amazing, so, like, I love Jackson. And that's cool, man. I love those stories. That's, like, you know, one of my favorite things about guitar and music and art. It's, like, the nostalgic attachment to, you know, the brand and the guitar. So personal nostalgia really plays a fact into ultimately choosing who is the quote-unquote best brand. You know, it's kind of hard for me because the brands I love aren't necessarily geared towards metal, but I try to turn them into metal. And, you know, Gibson and Fender aren't necessarily the most metal brands out there, but there are some metal players who play those instruments, such as myself. Now, let's talk about the poll that I made in the community tab. This has to deal with the fans' opinions in the modern day. Now, out of Schecter, Jackson, Ibanez, Solar, and ESP, over 3,000 votes were entered, and thank you guys so much for playing along. ESP almost won by 50%. That's insane. And I think that has to deal with the 2022 and 2021 product line. For example, the ESP LTD lineup with stainless steel frets and all the other specs that I mentioned a couple minutes ago. They're killing it right now in 2022. And that's kind of a segue into my next talking point and my next, you know, just kind of addendum to what I'm talking about right now. It's like, what are you doing for us lately? Us, meaning the consumer and the player, right? You know, nostalgia and what they did originally can only go so far, man. You know, especially in the modern day, people's attention spans are very, very short anymore. And that puts a lot of pressure on brands to constantly be relevant and changing their brands and their marketing and their specs, all the above, man. So I think that's why ESP killed it in that poll out of the other 4 brands that I mentioned. But who's not to say there's a lot of other brands that aren't killing it out there. You know, you see a lot of boutique custom shops really making a rise here in, you know, 2020, 2021, 2022, and beyond. I mean, Kiesel, Balaguer, Ormsby, Mayonis, you know, there's a whole bunch of them out there where they're not the powerhouses per se, but they are up and coming, and they offer a different kind of niche, you know, just vibe with their guitars and their marketing. They're not mass produced, they're kind of more quality over quantity, generally speaking. So yeah, man, just long story short, it's all about what you're doing in the modern day that really alters people's opinions. You know, what you did in the 70s and the 80s and 60s and 50s, even before that, there's a couple brands that really hold on to that, but it's like, what are you really doing for us in the modern day? And that ultimately shapes people's opinions going forward. And last but not least, who was on the artist roster? Who's killing it with the big names attached to the brand? I mean, again, all the brands that I mentioned in that community tab and community poll all have great artists. I mean, I wish I could have added more to the poll, but you could only add 5. I wish I could have added like 15, right? Then it would have been a really fair kind of shake, right? But anyway, man, I mean, Ibanez, you know, has an insane roster. ESP has an insane roster. Solar Guitars has got an awesome roster. Balaguer's got an awesome roster. Jackson has an awesome roster. Gibson has an awesome artist roster. Fender has a couple, you know, metal guitar players, etc., man. I'm rambling right here talking about the artists, but the artist attached to the brand really is like the selling point and the final like push for a consumer to be like, yeah, I like that brand because my favorite guitar player plays that brand. You know what I mean? So it's just interesting how like we as fans of music and the guitar really identify with the brand because of the artist attached to the brand. You know what I mean? And kind of getting back to the more boutique and smaller companies. Smaller has a negative connotation. I don't mean that in a negative way, just not as big. They're starting to grow their artist roster. I mean, again, Balaguer guitars, Kiesel guitars, Ormsby guitars. You know, you see a lot of these bigger artists going with companies that aren't as big, and in turn growing these smaller companies into medium-sized and now kind of big companies. I mean, Kiesel guitars is pretty big. Balaguer guitars is only 8 years old. It's getting pretty big. So, you know, it's just funny how like because of the artist attached to the brand can really dictate how big or how small a company can be. So just yeah, really interesting to see how like the fluctuation of popularity deals with the artist attached to the brand. So now if I had to give an answer to who I think is the best metal guitar brand, I gotta go with ESP right now. Just off the sheer fact of the quantity and quality and all the positive things people are saying online and in person, man. In my opinion, you'll be very hard-pressed to find somebody to say a lot of negative things about ESP guitars, whether it's LTD, E2, or literal ESP. A lot of people really say nice things about ESP guitars, and their artist roster is pretty awesome. I mean, you got Metallica, you know what I mean? Like, no, that's not the end-all be-all, but I mean, you got James and Kirk on there, so it's kind of rad. So, yeah, man, just if I had to pick one, ESP for now. However, like I said, the rise of the boutique and smaller custom shop guitar brands are really kind of changing things and shaking things up, and they're giving these bigger companies a run for their money. So it's just cool to see, like, you know, the underdogs kind of starting to almost take over a little bit. So all in all, man, just yeah, that's who I would pick, but you know, there's a lot of great brands out there. So yeah, man, those are just my opinions. So everybody, in conclusion, what do you guys think of what I said in this video? Do you agree with me or disagree with me? What are your thoughts and opinions about who is the best brand right now in 2022? Leave your thoughts down below, and I'll meet you down below in the comments, okay? I'd love to hear from you guys, and if you're angry with me or angry with anybody in the comment section, hey man, that's on you, man. This is all in good fun, and at the end of the day, we're just talking music and talking, you know, guitars. It ain't that serious, right? So everybody, I'm gonna get out of here. Thank you so much for watching. If you're brand new to my channel, be sure to subscribe. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay metal, and I'll see you guys next time. Later.